Chosen one, those venomous whispers that were meant to bury you have instead crowned you as the undisputed champion of your community. Their toxic gossip, every lie, every fabrication, every desperate attempt to tear you down has backfired so spectacularly that the entire universe is applauding your victory. The very people who conspired in the shadows to destroy your reputation are now cowering in shame, while everyone who matters lifts you up as the shining example of authentic power, triumphing over manufactured darkness. This isn't just your story of survival. This is your coronation as the light that cannot be extinguished. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let me paint the complete picture for you, chosen one, because what happened to you wasn't random. It wasn't a coincidence. It was the universe setting up the most elaborate chess game you've ever witnessed, and you, without even knowing it, were always destined to be the queen who sweeps across the board in the final decisive move. Months ago, something shifted in your energy. Maybe you felt it, maybe you didn't, but others certainly did. Your authentic light began expanding in ways that made certain people profoundly uncomfortable. Not the genuine souls, they were drawn to you like moths to flame. No, it was the fake ones who felt the burn. The manipulators, the gossips, the energy vampires who had been feeding off the community's drama for years. Your very presence began exposing their carefully constructed masks, and that made you dangerous. What you need to understand about toxic people is that they have an instinct for self-preservation that borders on the supernatural. They can sense authentic light from miles away, and they know deep in their twisted cores that genuine authenticity is kryptonite to their artificial existence. So when your energy started expanding, when people began gravitating toward your realness in ways they never had before, these toxic individuals felt the threat to their carefully orchestrated social ecosystem. The first strand of this intricate web began with observation. They watched you, studied you, took notes on your interactions, your friendships, your vulnerabilities. They were building a psychological profile, gathering intelligence like spiritual spies preparing for war. What they discovered both frustrated and motivated them. You were genuinely good. There was no dirt to dig up, no skeletons to drag from closets, no ammunition readily available for character assassination. They decided to manufacture the ammunition they couldn't find. If you weren't providing them with material to use against you, they would simply create it from thin air. This decision, this moment when they chose fabrication over truth, was the first domino falling in a chain reaction that would eventually crush them under its weight. The second strand emerged from their recruitment strategy. Evil, you see, rarely operates alone. It seeks out accomplices, co-conspirators, fellow travelers in darkness. One by one, they began gathering their tribe. The bitter colleague who resented your success, the jealous acquaintance who couldn't stand your genuine relationships, the insecure friend who felt diminished by your confidence. What they thought they were building was an army. What they actually created was a house of cards that would collapse at the first strong wind of truth. The third strand was perhaps the most insidious. They began studying your community, identifying who might be susceptible to their poison. They mapped out the social dynamics, the relationships, the loyalties. They figured out who was connected to whom, who trusted whose opinion, who might be willing to believe gossip if it was presented in just the right way. They were social engineers preparing to detonate a reputation bomb, and they believed they had calculated the perfect blast radius. Here's where the fourth unfolding enters, the one they never saw coming. While they were plotting in shadows, the universe was mobilizing forces of light they couldn't even perceive. Divine protection doesn't announce itself with trumpets and fanfare. It works quietly, strategically, placing the right people in the right positions at exactly the right moments. Every person who would eventually defend you was being positioned like pieces on a cosmic chessboard, though none of them knew it yet. The attack began one day. Isn't it always something mundane like that? Evil rarely announces itself with dramatic flourishes. It slithers in through ordinary moments and everyday conversations. The first whisper was carefully crafted to sound like concern. "I'm really worried about," followed by your name, followed by some fabricated story designed to plant seeds of doubt. The tone was perfect, just the right mix of reluctant disclosure and righteous concern that makes people lean in and listen. But the first miscalculation revealed itself. The person they chose as their initial target for gossip, let's call them the first defender, had something these toxic individuals couldn't account for: discernment. Instead of immediately believing and spreading the poison, the first defender felt something off about the story. It didn't align with their direct experience of your character, so rather than becoming the first link in their chain of destruction, this person became the first crack in their foundation. The gossip campaign continued, spreading through the carefully mapped channels they had identified. Coffee shops became war rooms. Text message threads became weapons of mass destruction. Social media platforms became battlegrounds where your reputation was supposed to die a slow, painful death. They fed each other's narratives, building elaborate fantasies about your supposed transgressions, your alleged character flaws, your imagined moral failures. What they didn't realize was that each lie they told was creating evidence of their own toxicity. Every fabricated story was revealing their capacity for deception. Every moment of coordination was exposing their manipulative nature. They thought they were building a case against you, but they were actually building a case against themselves, creating a trail of evidence that would ultimately lead to their complete exposure. Meanwhile, the fifth revelation was weaving itself through the community in ways they never anticipated. People who had witnessed your genuine character firsthand began comparing notes, not about you, about the stories being told about you. The narrative being spread simply didn't match the reality they had experienced. Your kindness couldn't be faked. Your integrity couldn't be manufactured. Your authenticity couldn't be imitated. And when authentic people encounter genuine truth, they recognize it instantly. The sixth revelation emerged from an unexpected source: their own past victims. See, toxic people don't usually limit themselves to one target. They have a pattern, a history, a trail of previous damage. As word spread about what was happening to you, others began coming forward with their own stories of being targeted by this same group. The pattern became undeniable, the method became clear, the perpetrators became exposed. This is where the rising action reaches its crescendo. The toxic collective, seeing their carefully constructed campaign beginning to unravel, made a fatal decision. They escalated. Instead of retreating when they saw resistance, they doubled down. They made their accusations more dramatic, their stories more elaborate, their attacks more vicious. They were like gamblers who keep betting bigger hands when they're already losing, convinced that the next card will save them. But the seventh unfolding was already in motion, the thread of divine timing. Because you see, chosen one, this attack wasn't happening to you randomly. It was happening precisely when you were spiritually ready to handle it, to learn from it, to be transformed by it. The universe had been preparing you for this trial through every previous challenge, every small victory, every moment of growth that had led to this point. You were ready for this level of spiritual warfare, even if you didn't feel ready. The climax arrived with the precision that could only be described as divine orchestration. Multiple people, in multiple settings, began speaking up simultaneously, not in coordination with each other. They didn't even know about each other initially. But truth has its own momentum, its own intelligence, its own perfect timing. The first defender shared their doubts about the gossip with someone else who had similar concerns. A previous victim of the toxic group came forward with their story. A witness to the gossipers' coordination decided they could no longer remain silent. Like water finding cracks in a dam, truth began flowing through every weak point in their fabricated narrative. The carefully constructed lies couldn't withstand the pressure of multiple witnesses to reality. The social ecosystem they thought they controlled began rejecting them, like antibodies attacking a virus. The community they believed they could manipulate started thinking for itself. Their attack on you became the catalyst for the community's awakening. People who had been living in fear of these toxic individuals suddenly found their courage. Relationships that had been strained by gossip and manipulation began healing. The entire social dynamic shifted from one based on fear and control to one based on truth and authentic connection. The eighth unfolding revealed itself as your own transformation. The isolation they had intended to impose on you became a journey inward that connected you to your own power. The rejection they had orchestrated became a clarification of who truly belonged in your life. The character assassination they had attempted became character confirmation of the highest order. Every arrow they shot at you became a mirror that reflected back their own darkness while illuminating your light. As the truth emerged, the ninth strand became visible, the complete reversal of fortune. The toxic individuals who had sought to destroy your reputation found their own reputations in tatters. The people who had tried to isolate you found themselves shunned by the very community they thought they controlled. The gossips who had attempted to turn others against you discovered that they had turned everyone against themselves. But the 10th revelation was perhaps the most beautiful, your elevation. The community that had been temporarily confused by lies began celebrating the truth of who you are. The attention that was supposed to destroy you became a spotlight that revealed your genuine qualities. The limelight they had thrust you into became a platform for your authentic self to inspire others. People didn't just defend you, they began to see you as a leader, a symbol of what it means to maintain integrity under fire. The 11th thread wove together all the previous threads of perfect justice. The toxic collective, finding themselves completely exposed and thoroughly rejected, began their retreat. Some left the community entirely, unable to face the consequences of their actions. Others tried to reinvent themselves, but their true nature had been so thoroughly revealed that no one was willing to trust them again. The power structure they had built through manipulation and fear crumbled overnight. And finally, the 12th strand completed the pattern, your emergence into full recognition of your chosen status. The trial that was meant to break you had instead awakened powers you didn't know you possessed. The attack that was supposed to diminish you had actually amplified your light. The rejection that was designed to make you question your worth had instead confirmed your value beyond any shadow of doubt. Now, as we return to where we began, that coffee shop conversation that started it all, the irony becomes crystal clear. Those two figures who thought they were plotting your downfall were actually serving as unwitting agents of your elevation. The whispered conversation that was meant to be the first move in your destruction became the opening note of your triumph. The abandoned coffee cup on that table bears witness to the moment when evil overplayed its hand so dramatically that it ensured its own defeat. The community that surrounds you now isn't just offering support, they're offering devotion earned through witnessing your character under the ultimate test. The light that was targeted for destruction now illuminates the entire landscape, showing everyone what authentic power looks like when it refuses to be dimmed. The limelight that was supposed to expose your flaws has instead revealed your magnificence to a world that desperately needed to see what genuine truth looks like under pressure. This entire experience wasn't just about surviving an attack, or even about achieving victory over your enemies. It was about you finally understanding who you really are. The person who walked into this trial carrying doubts about their worth has emerged carrying unshakable knowledge of their divine purpose. The individual who once questioned their place in the world now stands as living proof that authentic light is truly invincible. The toxic individuals who orchestrated this elaborate scheme never understood the fundamental law they were violating. You cannot extinguish authentic light with artificial darkness. You cannot destroy genuine truth with manufactured lies. You cannot defeat a chosen one by using the very attacks that are destined to awaken their power. But let me tell you exactly how their downfall unfolded, because the details matter. The precision of their destruction was so exquisite, so perfectly calibrated, that it could only have been orchestrated by forces far beyond human understanding. Remember the person who seemed to be the ringleader, the one with the carefully applied makeup and the perfectly rehearsed expressions of false concern. They had spent years building their reputation as the community's moral authority, the one everyone turned to for guidance and wisdom. What they didn't realize was that people had been watching their methods for a long time, noting the subtle cruelties, the strategic manipulations, the way they collected information like a spider collecting flies. When their involvement in the campaign against you became undeniable, something extraordinary happened. People began connecting dots they had never connected before. That time 3 years ago, when another community member had suddenly left under mysterious circumstances, their fingerprints were all over that situation too. The pattern of character assassinations that had happened before you arrived, they had been the puppet master pulling those strings as well. The revelation was like watching a magician's trick exposed. Once you could see the method, every illusion crumbled. The Obsidian Inner Order is a sanctuary for those who have walked difficult paths and emerged with wisdom others can't see. We understand that some experiences exist outside the boundaries of what most people consider possible or acceptable to discuss. Every week we gather live on Zoom, real people with real faces sharing real stories without judgment. There's space here for the experiences you've carried in silence, the patterns you've noticed that others dismiss, the intuitive knowledge you've gained through your journey. We don't just listen, we understand. When you're struggling to make sense of your experiences, when you feel gaslit by a world that refuses to acknowledge your reality, you can return to our recorded calls and remember that your perception is valid. Join the Obsidian Inner Order, where your reality is honored and your voice is heard. Link in description. The other accomplice, the one who had done most of the actual legwork, spreading the gossip through social media and text messages, experienced a different kind of destruction. Their entire digital footprint became evidence against them. Screenshots of their contradictory messages, copies of their gossip-mongering conversations, recordings of their fake concern, all of it surfaced simultaneously. It was as if the universe had been keeping meticulous records, waiting for exactly the right moment to present the complete case file of their deception. But perhaps the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source, their own family members. You see, chosen one, when people reveal their true nature this completely, it doesn't just affect strangers, it shatters the illusions of those closest to them. Their own sibling came forward with stories of lifelong manipulation. Their teenage child posted on social media about finally understanding why they had always felt something was wrong at home. The destruction wasn't just professional or social, it was total, reaching into every corner of their carefully constructed life. The financial consequences began almost immediately. The first manipulator lost several consulting contracts when their clients learned about their involvement in character assassination. The second accomplice found themselves suddenly excluded from professional networks they had spent years building. Other members of their toxic collective discovered that associations they had taken for granted were no longer welcome. The economic cost of their moral bankruptcy was swift and severe. Meanwhile, your elevation continued in ways that defied every prediction they had made about how this would unfold. The workplace where much of the gossip had initially spread became your strongest base of support. Colleagues who had barely noticed you before began seeking out your input on projects. Your supervisor, who had initially been concerned about the whispers surrounding you, became one of your most vocal advocates after witnessing how you handled the situation with grace and integrity. The religious community, where they had tried to paint you as morally questionable, experienced its own awakening. The pastor addressed the congregation about the dangers of gossip and bearing false witness, though they never mentioned names. Everyone knew exactly what they were talking about. The same people who had been whispering in corridors began approaching you with apologies and expressions of support. Worship gatherings became a celebration of your character rather than a trial of your reputation. Your family relationships, which the toxic collective had hoped to strain with their lies, actually grew stronger. Relatives who had been distant before reached out to express their outrage at how you had been treated. Family gatherings became opportunities for people to share stories about your kindness, your reliability, your authenticity. The very bonds they had hoped to sever became reinforced with steel cables of shared indignation and protective love. The social events where much of the initial plotting had taken place underwent a complete transformation. The coffee shops where they had huddled in conspiratorial whispers became places where people gathered to discuss your positive impact on the community. The parties where they had recruited accomplices became celebrations where your absence was noted and your presence was requested. The social media groups where they had spread their poison became forums where people shared appreciation posts about your character. Your response to this entire ordeal revealed depths of spiritual maturity that surprised even your closest supporters. While others called for retribution, you chose forgiveness. While people wanted to see your attackers suffer, you demonstrated compassion. While the community rallied to punish those who had wronged you, you showed them what grace under fire actually looks like. This response, this choice to rise above the fray rather than descend into it, elevated you to a status that no amount of planning or manipulation could have achieved. People didn't just admire your character anymore, they revered it. You became living proof that authentic power doesn't need to crush its opponents, it simply outshines them so completely that they fade into irrelevance. The transformation in how people saw you was so complete that former neutrals became passionate advocates. The colleague who had always been politely distant became your champion in every meeting. The neighbor who had never done more than wave became someone who actively looked out for your well-being. The community members who had barely known your name became people who spoke of you with genuine affection and respect. Your influence expanded in ways that would have been impossible under normal circumstances. When you spoke in meetings, people listened with an attention you had never commanded before. When you offered opinions on community matters, they carried weight they had never possessed previously. When you made suggestions for improvements or changes, they were implemented with an enthusiasm that surprised everyone, including yourself. The toxic individuals watched this transformation with growing horror and desperation. They had expected you to either fight back with their own methods, thus proving their accusations about your character, or to retreat in shame, thus confirming their power. Your choice to do neither left them completely unprepared. They had no playbook for dealing with someone who responded to attacks with dignity, to lies with truth, to hatred with love. Their attempts to salvage their reputations became increasingly pathetic. The first manipulator tried to reinvent themselves as a victim, claiming they had been misunderstood or taken out of context. But too much evidence existed, too many witnesses had come forward, too many patterns had been exposed. Their attempts at rehabilitation only highlighted the calculation behind their previous persona. The second accomplice attempted a different strategy, complete denial followed by aggressive counterattacks against anyone who questioned their version of events. This approach backfired spectacularly, revealing even more clearly the vindictive nature that had driven their participation in the original conspiracy. Each attempt to defend themselves provided additional evidence of exactly the kind of person they really were. Other members of their toxic collective simply vanished from the community entirely. Some moved to different cities, unable to face the social consequences of their actions. Others retreated into isolation, emerging only when absolutely necessary, and then with the shamefaced demeanor of people who knew exactly how they were perceived. The few who remained tried to rebuild their reputations through good works and charitable acts, but authentic transformation and calculated image rehabilitation are entirely different energies, and everyone could feel the difference. The children in the community, with their uncanny ability to sense authentic truth, provided perhaps the most telling confirmation of what had really happened. Kids who had always been naturally drawn to your energy became even more openly affectionate. Parents began pointing you out as an example of how to handle difficult situations with grace. Teachers started using your story appropriately anonymized as a lesson about integrity and resilience. The ripple effects extended far beyond your immediate community. Word of what had happened spread through professional networks, social circles, and family connections. People you had never met began reaching out to express their support and admiration. Job opportunities appeared from unexpected sources. Invitations to speak at events began arriving. Your reputation had transcended the boundaries of your local environment and taken on a life of its own. The person who had entered this trial, carrying questions about their worth and wondering if they belonged, had emerged carrying unshakable knowledge of their value and their place in the world. The individual who had sometimes doubted their own perceptions had developed an unassailable trust in their ability to discern truth from lies, authenticity from manipulation. Your spiritual gifts, which had been developing quietly in the background, suddenly accelerated in their manifestation. Your ability to read people's true intentions became almost supernatural in its accuracy. Your capacity to inspire others through your own example expanded exponentially. Your understanding of how divine justice operates in the world deepened beyond anything you had previously imagined possible. The community that had been temporarily disrupted by lies and manipulation found itself transformed into something stronger and more authentic than it had ever been before. People who had been living in fear of the toxic collective discovered their own courage. Relationships that had been strained by gossip and suspicion healed and deepened. The entire social ecosystem evolved from one based on fear and control to one founded on truth and mutual support. The psychological warfare that had been intended to break your spirit instead forged it into something unbreakable. Every sleepless night you endured while wondering what lies were being spread became a meditation on your own inner strength. Every moment of isolation they imposed became an opportunity for you to connect more deeply with your authentic self. Every attack on your reputation became a clarification of your true values. They thought they were weakening you, but they were actually tempering you like steel in fire. Watch how the universe orchestrated the timing of their exposure. It wasn't gradual, it was sudden, simultaneous, overwhelming. Multiple people came forward with evidence on the same day. Different witnesses shared their experiences at the same time. Various pieces of their conspiracy were revealed within hours of each other. This wasn't coincidence. This was divine choreography, ensuring that their downfall would be as complete and undeniable as their attack had been calculated and vicious. The irony reaches its peak when you realize that their own insecurities, the very flaws they tried to project onto you, became the instruments of their destruction. The first manipulator's obsession with control revealed their deep powerlessness. The second accomplice's need for attention exposed their profound insignificance. Their collective hunger for drama demonstrated their spiritual emptiness. Every weapon they wielded against you was actually a mirror reflecting their own darkness back at them. Your attackers inadvertently became your greatest teachers. They forced you to examine your own character so thoroughly that you emerged with absolute clarity about who you are. They made you defend your values so completely that those values became unshakable foundations. They pushed you to your spiritual limits and discovered, along with everyone else, that those limits were far beyond what anyone had imagined. In trying to destroy you, they actually completed you. Your story became a template, a prophecy, a promise for others facing similar trials. People dealing with their own toxic situations began reaching out for advice and support. Your experience became a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever felt overwhelmed by the forces of manipulation and deceit. You discovered that your personal victory had become a collective inspiration. The toxic individuals who had orchestrated this attack never understood that they were actually serving a purpose far greater than their own petty motivations. They had been unwitting agents of divine will, forcing you through a transformation that elevated not just yourself, but your entire community. Their evil intentions had been hijacked by forces of light and turned into instruments of awakening. Their gossip, which was meant to push you into hiding, has instead put you in the limelight where you belong. Their lies, which were designed to make people question your character, have instead made everyone certain of your integrity. Their attack, which was intended to drive you away, has instead firmly established you as an integral and beloved part of the community. The whispers that began as weapons of war have become songs of celebration. The coffee shop conversations that started with malicious intent have been replaced by genuine discussions of appreciation for who you are. The social media threads that were supposed to destroy your reputation are now filled with testimonies to your character. This is what victory looks like for a chosen one. Not just the defeat of enemies, but the transformation of the entire battlefield. Not just personal vindication, but collective awakening. Not just survival, but emergence into the fullness of your divine calling. The very forces that rose up to oppose you became the instruments of your elevation, and the very people who plotted your downfall became the unwitting architects of your triumph. The limelight shines brighter than ever, but now you understand why you were meant to be in it all along. The coffee cup sits abandoned on that table still, but its meaning has been completely transformed. What began as a symbol of conspiracy has become a monument to the inevitable triumph of authentic light over manufactured darkness. The chosen one has risen, and the entire world is better for it.